So I want to talk about the idea that jobs are going away, and we might at some point in the near future end up in a place where the vast majority of humans don't have jobs as a stable thing in their lives. Instead, we are able to just enjoy an abundance of leisure. And so, for example, I'm reading this book, Upwingers, the Futurist Manifesto by FM 2030, and he has a chapter about this where he sets it up that like for the last couple hundred years the cry has been we want jobs,
Right.
but in the very near future the cry instead will be we want leisure. And let's just say that we do in the next 50, 100 years come to a place where maybe just, we don't need to work 5 days a week for 40 hours a week. Instead, maybe to get some sort of a paycheck, we get a UBI, and then you might work 15 hours a week, and this is considered your work. And some countries are already kind of moving in this direction, like France, and where everyone takes August off, and you might only work 30 hours a week, and you take a 2-hour lunch each day. This sort of thing. I don't see any downside to that happening. I could definitely work 30 hours a week and be very happy. But there's a practical question, which I kind of don't want to get into because I'm not an economist and I'm not a roboticist, and I don't know, I can't predict when this is going to happen.
Right.
But I'm more interested in the psychology of this.
Yeah.
So, for example, when I talk to my parents about this, who are older, obviously, they have this idea that human value and worth is tied up in doing a job and going to work every day and this sort of thing. There's a psychological thing there happening. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh man, I think that if it happens quickly, society crumbles in a weird way and then probably cobbles itself back together again. I think the problem, as somebody that's been really thoughtful about mental health for most of my life, but really intensely for the last decade, I've found that as someone with privilege and, I've always been low income, but I have access. I'm sharp enough to have access to social services and to mental health services. I seek them out. I try to make them sliding scale and free for myself. I also think a lot about mental health, and I have quite a big, and my personal story is rugged, but not as rugged as a lot of people. It's pretty fucking rugged, but still. I have had to climb a tremendous mountain of self-awareness to get to the point where I am comfortable with myself. I'm barely starting to get there, and I feel like that is such a privilege and it's taken so much work to get there. I think that work is a way that people escape the necessity to do that. I think that you don't have the energy when you get home at the end of an 8 or 10 hour workday to really think about who you are, because you don't need, you have functions to perform. You have to make food for yourself. You have to care for the loved one that you have. Even if you're single, you spend a lot of that time kind of trying to decompress from whatever it is you were doing. And I think that most people in most of the world run from the idea of having self-awareness at a deep level because it's terrifying.
So right now, if someone works at a grocery store, they stand behind a cash register for 40 hours a week, we call that a good life.
Right, that's a terrible life. Well, not really.
Yeah, but realistically, in 50 years from now, we might look back on that and think, one, I can't believe that was necessary.
Yeah.
And two, I can't believe we called that a good life.
Yeah.
I think that between now and then, there definitely is a psychological hurdle.
There is.
And it might be, part of it is we have in a sense been brainwashed to believe that that's a good life. Because if you were to stand back and look at that, or look at any of our jobs for that matter. Most jobs are pretty painful. I think that the average in America is 80% of people hate their jobs, not just don't like, but actively hate. It's something like that. There's a little bit of brainwashing that we have to undo, I think, to get to a place where we're comfortable with this idea that my value isn't tied up in this thing that's called a job.
Right.
But do you think that there are going to be some groups of the population that just can't deal with this. It
do.
will be, because I kind of do too. What
Yeah,
are your
I do.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. I think that anybody that's kept at bay the idea of sinking into a like personal realization of selfhood is going to struggle immensely.
We're not taught this ever.
We're
right?
never taught this.
And we go to school, so that,
Yeah.
I mean, we're lucky that we have like English classes where we read great literature. I mean,
Yeah, that's true.
that is a really deep, soul enriching thing.
Mhm.
But it's even that is like taught in the sense of like, oh, you can maybe one day become an English teacher.
Right.
You know, it's not taught in the sense of like this is going to enrich your life and
Right.
give you the benefits that are just like absolutely indescribable for your soul. You know,
Right.
the health of your being. I mean, part of this transition might be someone, maybe a future Betsy DeVos, you know, head of education, who's like, we need to start prepping young minds to prepare for a world when, like, they won't have a job because they just don't need a job.
Right.
And the world doesn't need them to work.
Right.
And they have to, like, humans will always build things and tell stories. That no one's taking this away from anybody. No one's taking work away from anybody ever. But your paycheck might be disassociated from this concept of work. You might work for to, you know, build your garden, to get your food, or to, I mean, build anything you want because you'll have that amount of free time to build the guitar you love to play. Or just to build your relationships, you know? No one's taking any of that away from anybody, but the whole, like, daily grind thing, we might actually have to start training young minds to prepare for that world.
Right.
And because I think that you're right, I think that there are some people who are just not going to be able to naturally adapt to that.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think that a lot of it's mitigated by whether or not social mental health programs become more widely available, whether or not people find more advanced ways of having kind of local tribal community infrastructure, because a lot of those like hardships go away when you have people to talk to about it, when you have a solid social group, when you have like a more Italian way of living where you're like, you got time to walk around and you've got like a group of people that you meet with every couple of days to chit chat, and you're, you know, more tapped in with people. But if it's the way it exists now and people are just increasingly bereft of that meaning and don't have anybody there helping them try to fill that gap, I think you get into a really dangerous situation where, I mean, you know, I think one of the things that the existential threat of AI a lot is this idea that it's going to make human work meaningless.
Right.
It's not that they're going to kill us. It's not like that we're going to build machines that are going to slaughter us all. I mean, nobody's worried about that.
Some people.
No, some people are worried about that. But I think a lot of people are worried about the idea that what happens when a computer makes a poem that is more beautiful than a human could ever write? What happens when music is created by computers that is much more pleasing to the ear than a human could ever create, and it robs us of the ability to create something truly meaningful?
There's a company new in San Francisco that it creates beautiful models that are real. You can go on their website, the Rosebud AI, I believe it's called, where you go on their website and you see all these beautiful models. They're not real people. Modeling might no longer need to exist. Because you can, right now, you can go on this website and you can send them pictures of clothing for your clothing website, and it will drape them over a beautiful model.
Wow.
Any model that you choose. And it's not a real person, so it's not, you know, costly.
Right.
It's just, there you go. But, so, one thing that's fascinating to me is that over the last decade, because of Spotify and a couple other things, it's become very challenging for for artists to monetize their music and their books.
Yeah.
It's actually easier to monetize, but it's hard to monetize in a way that you can pay your bills with.
Totally.
You can get $5 a month off Spotify or whatever, but good luck paying your bills off of that, right? But it hasn't stopped anybody from picking up guitar and learning to play guitar. And that might be the grand narrative here, is that we might not need to play music to pay our bills in the future. And that might be actually a good thing, because think of all the shitty music that's made from people who simply want to monetize a product.
I'm familiar with that
Right.
landscape.
Right.
Yeah, man. I think the thought really is that this all pans out just fine unless we continue to see an increasing weaponization of marketing. Like, marketing is already highly weaponized, and people are very unaware of how much they're being coerced into buying things and into caring about things that are maybe not particularly meaningful to their life in a fundamental way. I think if we see that gap being filled, if we see that time gap being filled by more video games, more Netflix, more, more kind of gluttony and sloth. I hate to use religious terms, but kind of what it is, if it's not exercised in moderation, we do see a degradation of society. Not if we see people really surge towards being outdoors and being with their friends,
right,
and picking up artistic pursuits, which is what I mainly see people gravitating towards. And like, even people create content, people create the shows that we watch. More people gravitate towards creating and less towards consuming. I think we're going to be okay. But if we stay consumption oriented, I think it's a little bit of a death knell.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And my concluding thought on this is that I think that this is a fairly radical transformation that we're going to be going through in the next 50 years, where like joblessness, however it comes about, it's already happening. We're already having huge swaths of the economy, right, that are being automated away. And we're eventually going to start embracing this, I think. And I think that right now is the time where we start having people think about the psychological impacts of this, and having think about like what other courses should be taught in grade school and high school and college, so that future generations are able to more seamlessly just merge into this new world where you don't have to work for 40 hours a week, and to be psychologically okay with that. Because I think that there is a little bit of retraining, mental retraining, that's going to have to come along for us to get here without a lot of people feeling like they're useless, and that their lives are hopeless. And these are things that, like, it doesn't have to be that way. And I think that it just starts with these conversations, with people thinking about how do we have these conversations, and how do we, make it so that we reevaluate what the good life is, and how do we appreciate all of the things that aren't work, and to redefine them as human value, apart from that 9-to-5 job.
100%, man.
And I think that we will get there. I think that we will.
I think we will too. My closing thought is we need to start now. We need to start really thinking about universal basic income now. We need to start really spreading the good word of what is meaningful, and what is kind of like, science knows this shit, man. There's empirically meaningful things to people. It's not a totally subjective world we live in anymore. There's things that make you objectively happier, and I think if we can start spreading that information, that knowledge now, we avoid the catastrophe of having the wealthy hold us out from that. We see that now with the COVID response, where it took a long time for people to tear their heart out and say, here's $1,200 that you didn't work for.
Right.
And it's like,
talk about a psychological trip that we're going through right now.
Lord,
is exactly
dude,
that. People being able to accept this money, and then know what to do with it,
squeezing
and also
blood from the stone,
not be jealous of your neighbors who didn't work for this $1,200 and you didn't either, but you feel more deserving of it. There's a lot of weird.
We gotta start working out that stuff now, because if we wait until the razor's edge, you're gonna see the ultra wealthy and the wealthy try to keep people out. That is what they've always done. That is what they will continue to do. Nobody wants to see you float if they're already floating. People naturally try to hold each other down, and we have to start equalizing that desire now, so that when everybody starts coming up, we can all kind of come up together without feeling like we have to hold each other down to come up together.
Right. That sounds good. For more on this, maybe do check out the book Upwingers, a Futurist Manifesto by FM 2030. I'm reading a free PDF on it that I found in a Google search, so it's out there for free, and definitely recommend it. It has a lot of this futurism is all chapter by chapter in that book, so check that out.
And let's plug our podcast, Dude Buddies.
Check out Dude Buddies,
also
on YouTube.
And I'm just going to plug my podcast real quick, The Modigliate Space. That is also on YouTube. Me and my buddy Sam, we talk about a lot of the same stuff.
They get into a lot of the futurism, transhumanism. Worth checking out, especially for all you stoners out there. You'll appreciate it.
Fuck you. Later, guys.